In the 1940s in India, there was an excitement in the air. The people's movement and struggle to gain independence from foreign rule had gained momentum, and freedom was not very far away. The Bengal school had risen at the turn of the century, led by artists like Abanindranath Tagore. The work of these artists represented a harking back and a deep nostalgia for the great art of ancient and medieval India. They rejected the Western academic style of painting, which till then had been the norm in India in the early 20th century. In the 1930s, Amrita Shergill represented an attempt to synthesize the Western vision in art and the Indian spirit. The Second World War was over. Winds had begun to blow in from Europe and America, where existing philosophies and ideas in art were being dismantled. New norms were being created as artists struggled to come to terms with the chaos around them. New ways of looking at the world and new manners of expression were coming into being. The people of India were beginning to see themselves as a nation with a proud and long history. Indian artists were also groping and rediscovering their roots in the soil of their ancient traditions. Traditions which had been severed over a period of 200 years.
So in a sense, there was a social contract among patrons, artists and viewers. And this social contract of understanding, if you like, has broken down. And I think that it's the consequences of this breakdown that really inform Indian art from 1947 to the present.
In the 1940s, there emerged a group of artists in Bombay who wished to create a new modern Indian identity. One that was based neither on a sentimental looking back to the past, as the Bengal school had done, nor on the following of Western traditions.
The progressive artist group was established, which has been given a lot of attention and critical acclaim. And the 6 founding members, there were 3 founding members and each of them brought one friend. Souza brought Hussain, Raza brought Gade, and Ara brought Bakre. And the 6 of them essentially sort of tried to break out from the established orthodoxies prevailing in Bombay at the time.
In 1948, M.F. Hussain and Souza visited an exhibition of Indian works at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in Delhi. It was a turning point for Hussain. He says, "I saw all the Indian works and then felt that I should paint something else." After visiting the exhibition, I combined 3 periods: the form of the Gupta period, the strong colours of the Basoli period, and the innocence of folk art. Hussain's paintings are truly and deeply rooted in his cultural traditions. His work is a fine synthesis of his understanding of both the Indian and Western idioms. Francis Newton Souza, who was a student at the J.J. School of Arts in Bombay, was born in Goa. He was intensely idealistic and was expelled from art school in 1945 for demonstrating against the British government. Sousa's works are striking, and they raise questions that force you to introspect. Through his paintings and his writing, Sousa unrelentingly reveals the hypocrisy and confusion of contemporary society.
I think the traditional conception of beauty has had a great deal to do with the imperative of harmony, of the bringing about of harmony between, or accord between between the viewer, what is perceived, and the essence of that experience. And somehow with the onset of modernity, it appears that the possibilities of harmony become diminished in some way, so that what the art experience would aim at is not necessarily the savoring of beauty, but possibly the recognition of terror. So rather than the beautiful, I think the states of being that come into play now are much more those of the grotesque. And a great deal of contemporary Indian art is really addressed towards these states. And I can't help but think that this is one of the inevitable outcomes of what you might call the experience of modernity, which is one of fragmentation, of alienation, and of the general breakdown of what traditionally would be seen as harmonic systems of being.
Today, all over the world and in India, there are a lot of tension. Today, there is a lot of not only disparity, but there are a lot of turmoil, lot of friction, lack of grace, and the innocence is lost in the world today.
In 1948, Raza passed out from the J.J. School of Arts, and 2 years later, he left for France to study at the famed École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Since then, he has continued to live and work in France.
After 25 years of work, I was not satisfied. I looked at my own paintings and I told myself, Raza, you are not there. This is French contemporary art. There are hundreds of painters doing this. And I went into introspect. Serious thinking was necessary. It was an inner journey, which meant that instead of European concepts, I started to study what was Oriental art, what was Indian art, which revealed to me as a colossal civilization.
They used to discuss these problems at that time when this is in the 60s. They used to discuss the double destiny of the Indian writer or poet or artist, etc. So they used to say that you have a tradition which is, thousands of years old, which you cannot deny at any rate. You can't deny it. But you are living in a world which is modern, and you have all these influences coming from all over. So you have to undergo a kind of synthesis to find a thing, your own. And then we used to say that if very young and very aggressive in certain ways, used to say that if there is anything Indian, it will be there, because you cannot wipe out your accent. Wherever you come from, you carry that thing with you.
The universal is the external observer who is seeing in them. So people talk about universal language, art has a universal language. But then, as far as the practitioner goes, there is no universal language. It's a personal language. There are some people who are sold out to this idea. Well, we are one world kind of a thing. There might be people like me who belong to smaller units of place.
Traditions bring to us the distilled knowledge of the finest minds of the past. Roots in one's local soil help us to understand ourselves and our own culture. It is from this understanding that the artist can hope to have a meaningful expression which is relevant for mankind.
Essentially, all creative expression is about the human mind, human soul, heart, whatever one wants to call it, trying to understand oneself, and in that process of understanding oneself, sustaining that journey, and in the process of sustaining that journey, finding all the necessary forms of expression, and genuinely, without compromise. Essentially it's about not compromising and expressing something which reflects that genuine search. It's a continual search.
But then every kind of art, from where it emerges, I mean, it's like a plant which starts from the soil and it grows towards the sky. It is trying to exceed itself. That way, every kind of art comes to a point when, of course, it exceeds itself and it puts forth something that is a little beyond the root connections it has. That is true with all literature. That is why art and literature from all over the world are reacted to people from other parts of the world quite readily. There cannot be no art worth the name unless these root connections are intact.
Tradition to me are like our roots, which stay but which also flower with every kind of a shoot, an offshoot that germinates out of the larger whole. And it depends upon individual perceptive capabilities and inner convictions that you can make these shoots sprout in different directions. So it needn't be that the understanding of tradition is about only replicating what tradition has tried to present itself as, but they can be like takeoff points, which give you an access to another genre of the flight of your imagination.
I thought the artist is a man who attributes his own, heart and soul into an object. So the entire process of work of art is actually you first stand on a plane of reality and then you take a step into unknown.
The practice of art is an extension of your way of seeing or your way of visualizing things. So that is compulsive, that comes from within you. It is something that you cannot live without.
The message of my work is my life, because I paint, so I live, I exist.